They say the third time is a charm, and hopefully this time around, Minister Iipumbu Shiimi will be able to deliver his midterm budget review statement in the National Assembly. Now, on Monday and Tuesday, he was unable to do that due to the fact that Parliament did not meet the required quorum of 49 members in Parliament, particularly for a session where voting is required. My name is Ricardo Tlangosep. A very good afternoon to you and welcome to this special broadcast from the Parliament courtyard of the Republic of Namibia, where we are, of course, eagerly awaiting one of the critical items on the calendar for the Treasury of the Republic, where the midterm review budget statement is, of course, being delivered. This one in particular is not a new budget that's being tabled, but rather just a review of what has happened and how the budget that was tabled earlier in the year is being executed so far. This time around, the President, the Minister of Finance, of course, delivering a budget early in the year that was the largest budget to date, over 100 billion Namibian dollars, of course, tabled earlier this year. Here to just dissect the importance of this review statement, and of course, this critical juncture in our financial year, I'm joined by Ms. Chantal Hasselman, who is country's senior representative from PwC. A very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much once again for coming back for the third time.
Good afternoon, Ricardo, and thanks for still having me.
Of course, Rodney Hype, an economic researcher, also joining us for this afternoon. Thank you so much for making time out to be here with us, Rodney.
Thank you, Ricardo. It's an honor to be here.
Well, just to reflect back, of course, we know it's been quite an interesting turn of events over the last 2 days. I think we've reflected much on it, but I guess it really just gives us an opportunity to continue re-emphasizing the importance of the message and the importance of this day. Rodney, I really just want to start with you. It's a critical juncture in our financial year, halfway through the year, basically. Just reflect on the importance of having this sort of exercise for the country.
It's a Kairos moment, but I would say we have a blue corner and a red corner. The blue corner is basically that it's an election year.
Yeah.
And too much of the budget will be around development and growing the aspects of the economy to reflect a better outcome and responding to the needs of the people before people make a critical decision in November. And I also believe in the red corner is the year we are faced with drought as a impending danger to our economic stability. And I believe that the minister has taken all those points into consideration as we continue our discussion and unpack it more.
Well, I think with regards to personal budgeting, Rodney, we also know generally, you can always open it up and do the review. But at a national level, to have a day sort of like allocated to having that reallocation as well. Just chat to us around what it means for the broader economy for us to take stock of the execution and performance of the budget.
The economy has a very stochastic way of growing. Things happen at random. We can only sit, analyze, and monitor. But the midterm budget review basically puts you in an element where the surprise meets you before you even reach your yearly targets and goals. Many companies currently in the moment are currently feeling a bit of economic shock, and we have seen that the IMF and all those global institutions has revised down growth from the expected, forecasts they have made. Yeah. And that puts us basically in the epicenter of everything. The midterm budget basically is to shake up a little bit of the government operations and say, look, here is a fiscal commitment that we are making to you. Here's a fiscal commitment that businesses and companies have to abide by and to meet the government halfway in terms of their endeavors. And I believe that also comes with the sentiment that we shouldn't be a sleeping economy. Therefore, the given amounts, it's also a stimulation for the economy. You will find businesses that will be knocking on the doors of government and say, because you have given us this little bit of glimpse of hope, we are emerging as the ones that want to be recipients or be at the exchange hands of government. And I believe also on the other end, knowing that entrepreneurship is not easy. You have entrepreneurs that are waiting to be paid by the government, and they are just waiting for the official announcement to be made. And I believe and I know confidently that our minister is pro-MSME and pro-business. And like previous dispensations in the Namibian government setting between fiscal, trade, and investment, the three of them cross at a juncture where they are very competitive. Very competitive.
Very competitive. We're going to unpack that a little bit as we continue with our chat. But Mrs. Hasselman, I just wanted to bring you in, of course, at this stage as well. Quite an important day in terms of this budget review, particularly from the corporate. Why is this an important juncture for us during the course of our financial year?
During the speech as tabled in February, there was also mention of a lot of tax proposals, also being referred to at the time as quite a busy budget. And in that regard, a lot of expectations created in terms of the tax proposals as one example, and also in terms of economic reforms. So in the first 6 months of the year, yes, we've seen amendments coming through, but it was not also the full list. So there is also a lot of expectation as to what is still on the agenda, what is higher up on the agenda, and the timelines to some of those anticipated changes.
Rodney, I really wanted to bring you back into this conversation. I know we reflected a little bit on Monday around it, but just to track back to February 28th, when the fifth budget was announced by the Minister of Finance. Of course, he had dedicated that also to the late president, which had had his untimely demise about 7 days before, about 21 days or so before the budget was delivered. And the dedication was made to him as well. And we know he's been an instrumental part of the construction of the state architecture of the Republic of Namibia as we know it. But more so, when he took over, there were two key events. 2015, 2016, when he started, we saw what was going on with the global economy going into a depression in 2016. And then again, when he took over for the second time around, I think literally the month that they were supposed to be sworn in 2020, the advent of COVID, of course, also hit, posing other economic challenges as well. Just a brief reflection from your side, from an economist perspective, in terms of his fiscal policy and how he handled the national purse.
I believe in terms of the international pressure, punitive measures that were put in place by Namibia shows that we are not just at a palliative approach in terms of our budget restructuring and also our fiscal trajectory. Personally, I made an analysis in terms of the president's progress and our late president, beloved president, his progress and achievements in terms of policy and his response towards monetary changes. And I believe that we are at a point where post-COVID, the recovery was quite amazing, apart from businesses that were in a cyclical trap that is meant to be spread out. And you have to understand that as time changes and some of the market changes and the shifts that do happen in the markets take quite a time to adjust. And this adjustment is not just because they don't have the money for it, but sometimes they are a little bit skeptical to jump back and do business as usual. Nonetheless, there were also local businesses that took the jump away from their normal status quo of doing business, and they ventured into more approach of pharmaceuticals, clinical supplies, in to respond to the immediate need. And that also has put a shift in terms of the skills that were attained in certain sectors, because there were businesses that were looking at growing in technology, growing in infrastructure or manufacturing. How did they really turn from this cycle is something that we can only tell now. But after the emergence or those chapters that have closed in terms of business sentiments, businesses now want to align with the emerging green and oil sectors. They want to look at COVID gave us a hit, and based on their sustainability or liquidity, they couldn't survive or withstood the shock of COVID. But they say we want to reinvent them ourselves and look at Namibian economy a different way. Therefore, I think the punitive measures that I'm speaking to is how these businesses were helped with stimulus, how they were given subsidies, how some of them took on new initiatives. For example, in the bio sector, you see that also in the green space and green hydrogen. So the optimism that is sparking is good for Namibia in a very good light. And I would put it again into the blue corner of my discussion. And then there was a snippet today that I read that Namibia is one of the most friendly places, I believe, in Africa of doing business. And it's ranked second. If we remove certain elements from South Africa, I believe we are number one, especially when it comes to safety and security. Then it means that spot actually belongs to Namibia. That means our resilience is quite very strong. And what should we thank it to? I believe a good fiscal stimulus is also a good thing.
100%. And I want to bring it back, of course, I think we reflected on a bit on Monday, but I just want us to re-emphasize that we know that there has, of course, a lot of tax reforms, as you've mentioned, but relief, of course, coming for corporate companies as well, reduction of revision of corporate tax from 31 to 28%. Reflect a little bit on that in terms of, number one, when we are going to start seeing that effect, and number two, what sort of benefits this could bring for corporates and companies that are particularly trying to set up, especially in view of the fact that we want to become an industrialized nation.
Well, it's already effective as we speak, but it's just also determined by when an entity's financial years start. So that will be a phased-in approach as the CCs and the close corporate and the companies have different financial years. So, but it can already be expected and built into the planning around spending and even in their own near future calculation and expectations. So it is a positive for Namibia, and especially also what was mentioned in the speech in February around what is expected over the MTEF in terms of further 1% drops. It brings us a bit more aligned to, in Southern Africa, we're a bit more competitive, not yet at levels where South Africa and Botswana is, for example, but definitely not at the high of 32% anymore. And then Namibia also still having the form of close corporations as doing business.
Yeah.
And they are, per the Companies Act, also subject to this reduction. So, which is positive because we have many SMEs that would operate in a close corporation, for example. So that is definitely supporting our smaller businesses as well.
But in terms, I mean, of course, we know the expenses, we know that those ones don't end. It's almost like running your own household expenses. The bigger the family gets, the bigger the expenses get. I just want us to focus a little bit also on the revenues as well. We know, of course, it's been looking a bit better, Rodney, in terms of recovery. Slowly but surely, we're getting there as a country. One of the key concerns generally that many of you economists have been warning about is the reliance on the revenue that's coming in from the SACU pool as well. It's a little bit shaky, but eminently it might also significantly reduce. Reflect a little bit on that and perhaps some of the opportunities that are there for us to diversify our revenue sources.
Yes, thank you very much, Ricardo. That's a very nice question. I believe the SACU comes with the nature of business. Namibia has a very high import bill, and imports are very incremental in nature. A few years ago, we were speaking about 80 billion in imports, but now we have surpassed 100 billion in imports. That also comes with the rise demand and expectations of people in terms of the goods and consumables. They want high quality goods, and that also denotes probably the nature and the transition where the economy is going. If we have a luxury-based economy like in Namibia, what can we do with it? How can we convert that to the best advantage of the government or best advantage of the economy? Meaning people are not just looking at agrarian reform as a way of means of survival, but they want technology, they want machinery, they want equipment. What are some of the top main imports? Vehicles. That tells you that somehow there is a blend of a functional financial strategy in Namibia that is flowing over to benefit the other countries. How can we harness that growth potential in the economy for a better use? And I believe that if we find measures of retaining it in Namibia, hopefully that is what makes us more wealthy. Or hopefully it is our openness in terms as an economy, and that is one of the globally known macroeconomic principles of openness as an economy. We receive a lot of influx in terms of FDI. We have a very diverse and multicultural economy. It is one of the countries where you can go to and you can buy different cuisines in the evening. In Namibia, you can buy Indian, you can buy Italian, you can buy French cuisines, plus our local front as well, which means that people are evolving to embrace the dimension of growth in Namibia as an economy. And I believe we are not reverting back. We are not going back to where we can say that SACU receipts are becoming less and less. Now, my analogy about that, and I'll put an emphasis on that. How do you remedy a situation where fiscal stability, and when we say fiscal, we mean tax.
Yeah.
It means we have to split the tax between personal tax, company tax, and also trade tax. But how do we remedy that to keep a balance of a good industrial base? And that is where we should look at creating more value chains, adapting a nature where the local economy also becomes an exporter, a middleman for other goods going to Africa, regardless of how big our economy is. And I think we can use all those positive signs for a better sign.
Mrs. Hasaman, I see you wanted to add value to that question.
Yes, thanks. I can add on. Definitely agree with Rodney there. And just adding on would be that it is that we need to make sure that in terms of the traditional and local taxes, in terms of employee tax as well as value-added tax and corporate tax, that the much needed efficiencies come through with the establishment of our revenue agency, so that we can move along from the conversation around how do we broaden the tax base, so that we can then move along to a conversation in terms of how do we diversify the tax base, and we're no longer stuck at, is there data integrity, for example, and is there enough awareness?
Well, I see we're just having a bit of a look inside how the August House looks like. Looks like the numbers are filling up quite fast, but we have about 18 minutes still for us to know whether we are going to have a session with a quorum or not. Remember, according to Rule 153 of the Orders and Rules of the National Assembly, it's of course a requirement for about 49 members to be part of that. Remember, the non-voting members do not count in this case, so the quorum, there's 49 that's required, voting members to be part of that as well. And of course, the Speaker is not counted as part of that. So we're seeing now that the Speaker is entering the chamber. What we're going to go do is go for a quick break before we head back and then join you straight into the studio as well. But we'll be still continuing to bring you analysis after the session. Stay with us.
And I was saying to myself, what is happening? But anyway, he was having a conversation with a colleague outside, so that really made us to wonder, is that a conspiracy now to keep us away from getting on with the job? Obviously, that is not the case, so we are all here. Petition. Petition, honorable members, I lay upon the table in terms of Rule 127, subsection 1 of the Standing Rules and Orders, a petition handed to me by the Coca-Cola truck assistance employees under African Personnel Services or Personnel Services contract. These are people obviously being employed for a number of years under some sort of contract arrangements. Petitioners are calling on the National Assembly to investigate the pressing issues that they are experiencing with the company of low payment and lack of job security that they are now currently facing. Honorable members, the petition is going to be referred to the Standing Committee on Constitution and Legal Affairs and Petitions as established under the committee rules for investigation and report back to this Assembly. If you agree, I'll do precisely that. Thank you. reports of standing and select committees, if any. The Honorable Dr. Jode Ojo, you have the floor.
Yeah, Honorable Members, Honorable Speaker, I lay upon the table for information and note-taking by this august House the report on a parliamentary study and cooperation strengthening visit to the Parliament of the Federal Republic of Germany and State Parliament of Thuringia, Berlin and Erfurt, Germany, from 18th to the 23rd of September 2022. The report encapsulates the insights and outcomes of the visit, and the visit represented a significant step in reinforcing the bilateral relations between Germany and Namibia, focusing on parliamentary cooperation, enhancing economic ties, revising visa policies, and fostering mutual support in diverse sectors. The report will be transmitted to the relevant offices, ministries, and agencies for implementation of the recommendations. I so move, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you very much. Obviously, that report has been overtaken by events, but we'll keep it for the record purposes. Now, honorable members, I've taken note. I've taken note of the fact that it's only the ladies who are commenting. It's interesting, huh? Okay. Other reports and papers? Minister of Finance, other reports and papers.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Speaker. I lay upon the table, in terms of Rule 222 of the Standing Rules and Orders, reports of the Auditor General on accounts of the following. 1, Municipality of Windhoek for the financial year ended 30th of June 2022 and 2023. 2, Municipality of Omaruru for the financial year 2021-2022. 3, Municipality of Marienthal for the financial year ended 30th of June 2023. 4, Municipality of Ochiwarongo for the financial year ended 30th of June 2023. 5, Town Council of Ondangwa for the financial year ended 30th of June 2023. 6, Town Council of Kurenkuru for the financial year ended 30th of June 2023. Namibia Central Intelligence Service for the financial year ended 31st of March 2024. Namibia Competition Commission for the financial year ended 31st of March 2024. Namibia Agronomic Board for the financial year ended 31st of March 2024. And finally, National Disaster Fund for the financial years ended 31st of March 2018, 2019, and 2020. I so move, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you very much. Mr. Emmanuel Hoya, would you introduce? Okay, can I do this? Okay, I'm the one to do it. Yes. Okay. Honorable members, I have the greatest pleasure to introduce Mr. Oscar Simasiku Muyatwa, a newly appointed Deputy Secretary of the National Assembly, effective the 1st of September. Those of you who might not know our new Deputy Secretary, he's a former public office bearer director, and we were interacted with the National Assembly and the National Council for a number of years, so he's not new to the work of Parliament. You are most welcome. Notices of questions, notices of motions. I think we have to forego that. We don't have a message from the head of state, nor do we have questions, nor do we have ministerial statement. So can we go to the heart of the matter? Thank you very much. The notice of a motion is the one of the Honourable Minister of Finance and Public Enterprises. Does the Honourable Minister move that the bill be now be introduced?
Yes, Honourable Speaker, I move a motion that the appropriation amendment bill be introduced and considered as an urgent bill in terms of Rule 193, subsection 1, read together with Rule 168, subsection 1 of the Standing Rules and Orders. I so move, Honourable.
Thank you very much. Who seconds the motion of the bill to be considered as urgent bill? Thank you very much. Is there any objection? No, hang on.
There's no objection.
Is there any objection?
No objection.
Then it's agreed to. The Secretary will read the bill the first time.
Where's the bill? Appropriation Amendment Bill.
Does the Honourable Minister of Finance and Public Enterprise move that the bill now read a second time?
I so move, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you. Any objection? None. Who seconds? The whole House. Agreed to. Honourable Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. I would like to apologize also for coming late, and on behalf of my colleagues, we were locked up in the Cabinet Committee on Treasury and Trade and Development. So we just finished a few minutes ago.
The most important thing is you are here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Honourable Speaker, honourable members of Parliament, fellow Namibians, it's my singular honour and privilege to table before you the 2024-2025 mid-year budget review this afternoon. As customary, this review follows the 2024-2025 national budget, which I tabled before this August House on the 28th of February this year, under the theme, Continuing the Legacy of His Excellency Dr. Hage Geingob by Caring for the Namibian Child. I tabled the 2024-2025 mid-year budget review against the backdrop of the ongoing drought that has weighed negatively against domestic economic activities and caused considerable hardship for many of our citizens. As a result, it has become necessary to make additional provisions to mitigate the impact of the drought on livelihoods and economic activities broadly. Going forward, it is imperative for Namibia as a drought-prone arid country to continuously invest in climate-resilient infrastructure and pursue climate change mitigation measures and adaptation policies. Meanwhile, although the Namibian economy continues on the recovery path, we have revised down our growth projections relative to our view in the main budget in February this year. The revisions stem primarily from expected lower output from the mining and agricultural sectors, which have been negatively affected by low global demand for diamonds, as well as the ongoing drought. Against this background, we still remain with the conviction that the macro fiscal policy framework we tabled on the 28th of February this year still remains broadly appropriate. As said previously, in the short to medium term, the budgetary framework is built on three reinforcing policy pillars, namely, one, stimulating domestic demand through boosting household incomes and creating a conducive environment for businesses to thrive and expand investments. Two, accelerating investments in productive public infrastructure through upgrading dilapidated infrastructure, expanding social infrastructure to meet the needs of a growing and rapidly urbanizing population, and ensuring delivery of frontline public services. Three, cultivating fiscal prudence through maintaining a primary surplus over the medium-term expenditure framework. Nonetheless, in this mid-year budget review, we have proposed the requested short-term expenditure adjustments to meet the most urgent and pressing emergencies. This was done through allocating the additional revenues realized, as well as reallocating funds from projects with low execution rates. We believe the adjustments proposed in the 2024-2025 mid-year budget review will greatly assist us to ward off potential adverse risks and enable us to stay the policy course to restore macroeconomic stability while supporting social sectors. It is in this context, Honorable Speaker, that I, in terms of Article 126 of the Namibian Constitution, read together with Section 1, Subsection 1 of the State Finance Act, have the honor to table for favorable consideration and approval by this August House the 2024-2025 Appropriation Amendment Bill and adjusted revenue, income and expenditure for the financial year 2024-2025. Global economic, fiscal and financial context. Honorable Speaker, in the recently released World Economic Outlook, the International Monetary Fund projects global economic activity to grow by 3.2% in both 2024 and 2025. A mild moderation from 3.3% recorded in the previous year, that is 2023. The projections are underpinned by continuing global disinflation and the subsequent recalibration of monetary policy. Going forward, near-term structural reforms remain necessary to lift the medium-term growth prospects in most economies while maintaining support for the most vulnerable. Honorable members, from a regional perspective, economic growth in sub-Saharan Africa is projected to remain steady at 3.3% for 2023 and 2024 before picking up to 4.2% in 2025. The estimated improvement in growth prospects for the region in the coming year highlight the abating adverse impact of weather shocks and easing supply constraints. Broadly, while global inflationary pressures have abated, there still remain pockets of significant potential downside risks to economic outlook. These include volatility in international commodity prices, an escalation in regional conflicts, a deeper growth slowdown in the Chinese economy, as well as a surge in protectionist policies among the global community. Accordingly, on the fiscal front, it is imperative to rebuild fiscal buffers and stabilize public debt dynamics as measures to safeguard long-term macroeconomic stability. In addition, necessary structural reforms to create more job opportunities, increase resilience and adaptability to climate shocks, as well as to protect the livelihoods of the most vulnerable remain critical going forward. On the domestic front, Honorable Speaker, honorable members, the domestic economy remains resilient despite vulnerabilities in the global economy as well as adverse weather shocks. In this context, growth in the Namibian economy is estimated at 3.6% in 2024 before improving to 5.4% in 2025. As said earlier, this is a revision of the initial forecast presented in the main budget of 4% and 3.9% for 2024 and 2025 respectively. The revision of the growth forecast considered, among others, the significant weaknesses in the diamond sector as well as the gravity of the drought and its subsequent impact on agricultural activities. Meanwhile, value addition in the secondary and tertiary industries is estimated to be strong, underpinned by, among others, electricity and water generation, as well as strong consumption activities anchored on improving domestic demand, slowing inflation, and the downward trend in interest rates. The key risk to domestic growth in the short term remains weak global demand adversely impacting commodity prices, especially Namibia's key primary exports, which is diamond. This poses a potential threat not only to domestic output, but also to public revenue. Over the long term, contemporary climate-related shocks remain a risk to livelihood as well as domestic agricultural and electricity production. Against this backdrop, it is imperative to implement targeted policy packages to boost resilience and guard the economy against climate shocks. In this regard, the immediate focus of fiscal policy in the near term is to shield, in particular, the most vulnerable segments of our society from the impact of the ongoing drought. Similarly, the medium-term fiscal framework will continue to aim to implement further measures to improve climate resilience and adaptation while maintaining fiscal sustainability. Honorable Speaker, on the monetary and external sectors, aligned to global developments, especially in fuel prices, the annual inflation rate eased from an average of 5.9% to 5.9% in 2023 to 3.4% in September 2024. The easing inflationary pressures has provided the much-needed relief to consumers with subsequent overall positive spillovers on general consumption levels. Over the medium term, inflation is expected to remain well contained within the band of 3% to 6% per year. In line with moderating inflation trends, the repo rate was reduced by a cumulative of 50 basis points during the year to 7.25% to support domestic economic activities while still safeguarding the currency peg. Again, the downward trend in interest rates bodes well to ease the financial burden on both households and corporate budgets alike. On the balance of payments front, the current account deficit is estimated to have widened during the first half of 2024 as import flows increased significantly relative to exports, as well as higher outflow of payments on the service account. Nevertheless, we are happy to note continued foreign direct investment inflows stemming from ongoing exploration activities in the extractive sector, which finances the current account deficit and hold the potential for further boost in economic activities over the medium term. The stock of international reserves, as a result of this development, stood at 57.1 billion Namibian dollar at the end of September 2024, equivalent to 3.7 months of import cover, and remains sufficient to meet short-term international obligations. Honorable Speaker, honorable members, allow me at this point to shed more light on the latest developments from a fiscal policy perspective. As the preceding year came to an end on the 31st of March 2024, the outturn on fiscal indicators were generally consistent with our projected fiscal position and maintain the envisaged fiscal sustainability imperative. I want to underline this, especially for Honorable Smith, because he always says we are over-promising. The fiscal indicators have been generally consistent with our projected fiscal position and maintain the envisaged fiscal sustainability imperative. In this context, we have recorded actual outcomes as follows. Total revenue collections for 2023-2024 stood at 81.5 billion, slightly outperforming our revised estimates of 81.1 billion. This reflects over collections in some tax categories, including income tax on individuals and withholding taxes. Operational expenditure was recorded at 67.9 billion Namibian dollar in comparison to the estimate of 68.6 billion. This is equivalent to an execution rate of 98%, 98.9%. Actual outturn on the development expenditure stood at 7.1 billion against the revised budget of 8.4 billion, translating in an execution rate of 84.5%. We have noted concerning capacity, institutional and other operational constraints that impede timely execution of development expenditures. In this regard, the National Planning Commission is spearheading a process to identify the specific bottlenecks and make the necessary recommendations to improve the pace of project implementation going forward. Meanwhile, actual spending on interest payments amounted to 12.5 billion, well in line with the revised budget. Overall, total expenditure amounted to 75 billion, lower than the revised budget estimate of 77 billion. In line with the above, the actual budget deficit stood at 5.6 billion, equivalent to 2.4% of GDP, significantly outperforming our revised projections of 3.2% and a major improvement from 5.2% recorded in the preceding year. The total debt stock as at the end of March 2024 stood at 153.7 billion, equivalent to 65.1% of GDP, a moderation from 67.6% of GDP in the last financial year. Overall, the actual outturns for 2023-2024 demonstrate continued improvement in fiscal indicators driven by, among others, improving economic activities, strong revenue mobilization, and contained public expenditures. These outcomes are well aligned with the fiscal sustainability imperative, which we have adopted for the implementation over the medium-term expenditure framework. Honourable Speaker, in respect of the current financial year, the preliminary revenue outturn at half-year mark stood at 45.7 billion, equivalent to 50.5% of the initial projections in the budget. At this rate, revenue are somewhat 3.4% or 3.4 percentage points higher than the historical mid-year collection rate. We therefore broadly expect to outperform the initial budget projections. The execution rate on operational expenditure was 48%, while the development budget implementation rate, including expenditure commitments, stood at 37.4% by the end of September 2024, significantly below the desired levels. Meanwhile, the half-year execution rate on statutory expenditure stood at 43.2%, signaling potential underspending, especially considering the downward trend in interest rates during the second half of the financial year. At the half-year mark, the total debt stock stood at 161 billion, equivalent to 60% of GDP. Fiscal and medium-term policy stance. Honourable Speaker, honourable members, as I mentioned earlier, we have noted positive year-to-date performance in revenue collection for 2024-2025. As a result, the revenues are revised upwards by 1.7 billion to 92.1 billion. In comparison to the preceding financial year, we expect revenue to post a growth rate of 13.1% year-on-year. The projected increase in revenue for this financial year mirrors above average year-to-date collections, mainly on the categories of income tax on individuals, corporate tax on other mining as well as non-mining companies, VAT, withholding tax, and stamp duties. Meanwhile, owing to low international diamond prices and depressed demand, we have cut expected revenue from the diamond sector for this year by more than 2.3 billion Namibia dollar. Subsequently, sustained weaknesses in the diamond sector remains the most significant risk to the fiscals in the short to the medium term. The revenue outlook over the remainder of the medium-term expenditure framework remains uncertain, especially taxes on international trade, which remain subject to trade and economic developments in the region, which have a bearing on revenue flows into the customs revenue pool. In this regard, the volatility of SACU revenue is yet another key risk to our fiscal position. Nevertheless, domestic revenue streams remain resilient and are estimated to gradually improve, aligned to the positive economic growth outlook as alluded to earlier. As a proportion of GDP, total revenues projected to remain strong, averaging 30% of GDP. Honorable Speaker, consistent with the fiscal sustainability policy stance, aggregate expenditure over the next medium-term expenditure framework is anticipated to increase from a revised 101.2 billion in this current financial year to 106.1 billion by the end of the MTEF period, which is 2026-2027. These indicative aggregate expenditure ceilings will guide the preparation for the next MTF, subject to the updated revenue estimates, including SACU receipts. In this context, we will only commit to additional expenditure once we have confirmed the fiscal space to fund such undertakings. Accordingly, more substantive policy commitments will be announced with the tabling of the main budget for 2025-2026 in February next year. Honorable Speaker, honorable members, considering the revised expenditure levels, we still estimate the overall budget deficit for 2024-2025 to remain at 3.2% of GDP, with a moderate improvement in the primary surplus relative to the levels estimated in the main budget. Furthermore, in nominal terms, the deficit is revised downward slightly by 277.3 million Namibia dollar. Over the medium term, we estimate the deficit to average about 3.5% of GDP, critically dependent on revenue outcomes over the two outer years of the MTEF period. Nonetheless, as a fiscal policy stance, we aim to consistently maintain a primary budget surplus over the medium-term expenditure framework as a measure to moderate the pace of debt accumulation and subsequently manage public debt levels. With the revisions above, Honorable Speaker, the total public debt stock expressed as a percentage of GDP is estimated to reduce from 65.1% in 2023-2024 to 62.1% in this current financial year. Going forward, we estimate the debt ratio to remain on a downward trend, reducing to 57.8% by the end of the MTEF period. Accordingly, we remain committed to take advantage of the current growth momentum to drive debt metrics in the right direction, while still making the necessary provisions to meet our most urgent social and developmental needs. Progress on economic policy priorities. Honorable Speaker, from an economic perspective, the national priorities remain as enshrined in HPP2, Harambee Prosperity Plan number 2. Going forward, the National Planning Commission is developing the 6th National Development Plan, which is scheduled to be launched in April next year. NDP 6 will accordingly outline the desired national macroeconomic policy pathway over the next 5 years. Nevertheless, in the current 2024-25 national budget, we have prioritized resource allocations under the 3 policy pillars. That is, as I have mentioned before, stimulating domestic demand, accelerating investments in productive public infrastructure, and cultivating fiscal prudence. In this context, I'm happy to report, Honourable Speaker, some progress on implementation achieved during the first half of this financial year as follows. To provide some measure of relief to taxpayers and stimulate domestic demand, we have enacted and subsequently implemented amendments to various tax legislation in September this year. In this context, I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to the National Assembly and the National Council for the support that enabled us to pass these bills during the first half of the year. With these amendments, we were able to provide much needed relief to taxpayers, which will go a long way to boost domestic demand and support domestic economic activities. In the area of housing, the Ministry of Urban and Rural Development has commenced with the implementation of the 2023 National Housing Policy. In this context, the Ministry is establishing coordination and implementation structures, including the National Housing Policy Implementation Steering Committee and the Project Implementation Unit. Furthermore, although implementation has been slow, the Ministry seized with the procurement for, among others, urban land servicing, as well as prepaid water and electricity meters in various local authorities countrywide. The Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture has created a designated implementation unit to roll out the adopted recommendations from the 2022 National Conference on Education. In this context, the Ministry is expected to construct 512 classrooms countrywide this financial year, of which 296 classrooms were already completed by September this year. The ongoing reform program also encompasses improving digital infrastructure and professionalizing the teaching profession. The Ministry of Agriculture, Water and Land Reform has prioritized drilling boreholes and expanding rural water supply pipelines to improve access to water within communities, especially considering the increased drought incidences. In this regard, the Ministry has so far completed 115 boreholes and 20 earth dams in rural communities, with another 83 boreholes and 34 earth dams in the pipeline this year. We are further pleased to note that the procurement has been finalized and construction has commenced for the Rundu Water Treatment Plant, as well as a second Ohangwena Aquifer well field. Meanwhile, the procurement for the Oshakati water treatment plant is at an advanced stage. Furthermore, the Environmental Investment Fund of Namibia, EIF, has successfully drilled 70 boreholes this year, valued at 40 million, funded through both public and donor resources, benefiting approximately 35,000 people and more than 30,000 livestock. Looking ahead, the fund has a robust pipeline of projects related to water drilling, retrofitting, and the desalination of brackish water with an estimated value of 120 million Namibia dollar. The government remains committed to allocating resources and mobilizing development partners to support these essential water infrastructure projects. The EIF is projecting a pipeline of projects valued at 738 million for the upcoming financial year, primarily sourced from multilateral funding windows. These projects will focus on adaptation initiatives, including enhanced resilience in Namibia's peri-urban communities through sustainable agriculture and strengthening the adaptation capacity of artisanal fisheries. As a measure to improve food security in the face of the ongoing drought, the Ministry of Agriculture, Water and Land Reform has also expanded the area under cultivation for stable food production at various green schemes. Accordingly, we expect increased production thereof to reduce the deficit in local food production and subsequently improve domestic food security. The National Disaster Management Unit in the Office of the Prime Minister continue to roll out drought relief program to affected regions and communities at the cost of 129.8 million per month. In addition, through the Agricultural Bank of Namibia, we have rolled out a dedicated subsidy program to support farmers whose operations have been adversely affected by drought conditions at the total cost of 126.3 million Namibian dollars this year, during this financial year. The Ministry of Mines and Energy continues to fast-track rural electrification in line with the national ambitions to reach universal electrification by year 2040. During the current financial year, 18 public institutions and 88 rural households have been added to the national grid, with another 39 public institutions and about 1,000 households are still in the pipeline to be connected this year. Furthermore, government is engaging with all relevant stakeholders to map out measures to improve security of electricity supply and maximize beneficiation of energy resources endowment through the ongoing productivity task force on electricity supply industry. The government is also finalizing the modalities to implement the 860 megawatts Bayern's power project in line with the cabinet resolution. The Ministry of Works and Transport continues with program to expand the national road network, especially through constructing access roads to schools and clinics in rural communities. In this regard, during the financial year, preparatory work and construction activities are currently underway on more than 15 stretches of access roads in the rural areas. We believe improving road infrastructures in rural areas will go a long way, not only to improve living standards of such communities through easing access to services, but also broadly to unlock economic opportunities in those areas. Government continues to prioritize small and medium enterprises as catalysts for economic transformation and development with various impactful interventions. In this regard, the Small and Medium Enterprise Recovery Loan Scheme continues to gather momentum, with disbursements increasing to 398.8 million by the end of September this year, benefiting more than 360 SMEs. Additionally, the EIF, that is the Environmental Investment Fund, launched the Green Credit Facility, a consortial fund designed to support green SMEs and youth-led enterprises. So far, the facility has disbursed over 70 million to 118 SMEs, and the government plans to inject another 100 million to expand green entrepreneurship. We continue to make progress on the implementation of the Venture Capital Fund, which is aimed at providing patient equity capital for growth-oriented SMEs to scale up their activities with a view to help create much-needed jobs in the economy. In this regard, we have appointed the Board of Trustees for the fund and will formally launch the fund before the end of this current financial year. The Ministry of Industrialization and Trade continues to provide support to emerging SMEs through the Equipment Aid Scheme. In this context, the 2023 program assisted over 3,000 businesses, and we urge all qualifying SMEs to participate in the program this year, for which I understand applications are open until the end of this month. And we are happy to confirm that all big commercial banks have signed up as participants in the credit guarantee scheme that government has established. Accordingly, all qualifying SMEs who do not have the required collateral when seeking financing from financial institutions are urged to make use of the credit guarantee schemes. Honorable Speaker, tax policy and administration reforms. In the area of tax policy and administration reforms, the policy focus remains on measures aimed at providing relief to taxpayers and supporting the economy in the near to medium term as committed in the budget. These include, among others, the ongoing corporate tax, which we have reduced to 31% effective April this year, and are committed to a further gradual reduction to 28% during the 2026-2027 financial year. We have increased the threshold for income tax on individuals to 100,000 and are committed to further adjust all tax brackets for inflation creep in the 2 outer years of the MTF at a cost of 712.9 million per annum. With regard to tax amnesty, which is due to expire this Thursday, which is tomorrow, or which is this Thursday, we have received numerous calls for an extension from various sectors. In line with our commitment to strike a balance between collecting revenue and boosting the investment climate, we hereby extend the tax amnesty program for another 2 years. The extension has, Honorable Speaker, for another 2 years until the 31st of October 2026. The extension has considered the 2 years of COVID because the taxpayers were telling us that they lost income during COVID, and we have evidence to that effect, which significantly reduced the income of many taxpayers. The relief value proposition remains unchanged. That is, interest and penalties will be fully written off if outstanding capital is fully settled by the 31st of October 2026. Again, I would like to reiterate that this is a final extension of this program. Final extension of this program. And we urge all concerned taxpayers to participate before it's too late. We will no longer be in a position to extend it further. We are working with the Ministry of Mines and Energy, as well as other relevant stakeholders, to review and update the petroleum upstream fiscal regime to ensure clarity and simplicity for taxpayers in the light of the surge in exploration activities in these sectors. Again, Honorable Speaker, we will make more substantive tax policy commitments in the future budget statements once we have more additional certainty on the medium-term revenue outlook. Honorable Speaker, honorable members, Appropriation Amendment Bill. Earlier this year, on the 28th of February 2024, I stood before this August House and tabled a budget of 100.1 billion Namibia dollar, consisting of 74.6 billion in operational expenditure and 12.8 billion in development expenditure, of which 3.2 billion was for projects to be funded outside the State Revenue Fund and 12.8 billion in interest payments. The mid-year budget review process accords us an opportunity to improve the effectiveness of resource allocations by taking stock of the collective implementation of the national budget so far and make the requisite adjustments to meet unforeseen emergencies and ensure that we remain on course to attain our annual priorities. As I have indicated earlier, Honorable Speaker, we are projecting to realize additional revenues to the tune of 1.7 billion for this current financial year. In addition, considering the low execution rates on capital projects, a total of 2.1 billion has been identified for reallocation. The projects affected by budget reallocations are primarily in the railway sector. Nevertheless, given the importance of the railway sector to unlock economic activities, we will ensure that sufficient funding is availed to the upgrading and the development of the railway network going forward. Furthermore, we will work closely with the Ministry of Works and Transport and Transnamib to ensure that the upgrading of the national railway network is fast-tracked. During consultations for the mid-year budget review, additional expenditure requests to the tune of 8.3 billion were received for consideration. In keeping with fiscal sustainability narrative, we balanced these expenditure requests against the available resource envelope, cognizant of the imperative to manage borrowing requirements. As a result, for this current financial year, Appropriation Amendment Bill provides for additional spending of 3.6 billion as follows. We have availed 698.9 million for drought relief provisions under the Office of the Prime Minister, primarily to extend the food distribution program to eligible communities. These allocations provide drought relief program to be expanded to cover 308,750 households until the 30th of June 2025. This allocation increases the drought relief program budget for 2024-2025 to well over 1.4 billion. This is a significant resource envelope which highlights the importance of instituting climate resilience policies and measures to minimize the impact of weather events on livelihoods going forward. An additional of 139 million has been availed to extend the 600 Namibia dollar monthly conditional basic income grant to additional qualifying beneficiaries in urban localities countrywide. This is in addition to 117.8 million allocated to the Ministry of Gender, Poverty Eradication and Social Welfare to ensure sufficient coverage of the old age social grants to the elderly during this current financial year, because there was a shortage there. In total, 1.1 billion has been added on goods and service budgets of various votes, including, among others, 450 million for the Ministry of Health and Social Services to meet various emergencies in the sector, 233 million for summer cropping at various green schemes, 200 million to supplement the budget of the Electoral Commission of Namibia, 187.8 million for hostel catering and utility bills for the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture, 140 million to cover utilities of the Ministry of Defense and Veteran Affairs, 86.8 million to cover foreign exchange fluctuations for the Ministry of International Relations and Corporations, cognizant of overspending in the preceding year. Honorable Speaker, honorable members, a sum of 2.4 billion has been allocated to subsidies and other transfers to government organizations, inclusive 500 million to cover project shortfalls on public service employee medical aid, that's SEMAS, 386 million for the University of Namibia to cover its operational expenses, 187.8 million to supplement the contingency budget, 88 million to cover shortfalls on the student funding at the Namibia Student Financial Assistance, that is NASFAF, and 40 million to absorb the suspended electricity tariff increases by the Electricity Control Board. Considering the low execution rate, no additional allocations are made to the development budget. And we are satisfied that sufficient provisions were made for personnel spending in the main budget, and subsequently no significant additional allocations have been made to that expenditure category. Honorable Speaker, in being consistent with the spirit of the mid-year budget review process, these additional expenditure allocations met the criteria of unforeseeable and unavoidable emergencies in terms of unavoidable emergency items which cannot be deferred until the tabling of the main budget in February next year. In summary, we have increased the operational expenditure or the operational budget for this current financial year by 2.6 billion to a total of 78.2 billion, while the development budget has been decreased to 10.4 billion and debt servicing costs remain unchanged at 12.9 billion. Despite these adjustments, Honorable Speaker, we have left the initial ceilings of most expenditure votes unchanged. Noting the low implementation rate during the first half of the year, we are comfortable that the different ministries have sufficient funding to deliver on their mandates and meet government policy priorities for this current financial year. As such, we have encouraged votes to reallocate funds within their existing ceilings to meet other agent operational expenditure that could not benefit from additional allocations. To sum up, Honorable Speaker, with these changes, the national budget deficit will decline marginally by 277.3 million to 8.7 billion Namibian dollar, while remaining steady as a ratio of GDP at 3.2%. Accordingly, we will make the changes to the borrowing plan for the remaining months of the financial year as necessary. The detailed breakdown of expenditure allocations and revised ceilings for various votes are available in the Appropriation Amendment Bill before you. Honorable Speaker, honorable members, as I conclude my presentation this afternoon, I wish to underscore that domestic economic activities remain positive in the near term despite pronounced weaknesses in the diamond and agricultural sectors. Furthermore, we are happy to note signs of improving consumer sentiments, stimulated in part by the broad economic recovery as well as easing inflationary pressures and the downward trend in interest rates. The ongoing drought situation has far-reaching effects on the economy as well as the broader population, significantly the most vulnerable members of our society. To mitigate the potential adverse impact thereof, we have made the requisite expenditure provisions both through drought relief for distribution and support to farmers, providing funding for green schemes as well as strengthening the relevant social protection schemes to minimize loss of livelihoods. We are confident that in the short term, such interventions will assist to improve food security at both household and national levels. Nevertheless, we will prioritize long-term measures to improve fiscal resilience against climatic events. Going forward, there still remains some uncertainty regarding the expected revenues from the customs union. As such, we have deferred making substantive expenditure commitments for 2025 until we have improved visibility thereon. At the same time, we have and will continue to implement policy measures to strengthen domestic resource mobilization, broaden revenue base, and create a conducive environment for businesses to thrive. Lastly, our concerted efforts to maintain fiscal sustainability has begun to bear fruit, as evidenced in a narrowing budget deficit, improving primary surplus, and stabilizing public debt ratios. We maintain the view that a foundation of macroeconomic stability and fiscal prudence is a prerequisite to building a Namibia in which we can all thrive. The Namibian government remains committed to improve the standard of living of all Namibians. As such, we will continue to prioritize social expenditure, rollout of critical infrastructure to improve access to critical services, and pursue business-friendly policies to create a conducive environment for economic activities to thrive. On that note, Honorable Speaker, may I conclude my statement by thanking our collective leadership, championed by His Excellency President Nangolo Mbumba, assisted by Her Excellency Vice President Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah. I would also like to thank the Right Honorable Prime Minister Sarah Madila, Deputy Prime Minister Honorable John Mutora, members of Cabinet, and indeed all of you, Honorable Members of Parliament, for your continued understanding and support on fiscal matters. Lastly, I wish to appreciate my colleagues at the Ministry of Finance and Public Enterprises, the National Planning Commission, for their usual dedication during the compilation of the midterm budget review, as well as Team NAMRA for their persistent drive to mobilize much needed revenues. On that note, I thank you kindly for your attention.
Thank you very much. Without even talking about any further discussion or contribution, I'm asking the Honorable Hengarif, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, and thank you to the Honorable Shiimi for tabling the mid-year budget review. Honorable Speaker, Honorable Members of Parliament, I rise today to respond to the mid-year budget review as tabled by the Honorable Shiimi, which, while acknowledging our economic predicaments, lacks the bold steps needed to break free from the cycles of poverty, stagnation, and economic dependency that grip Namibian households. As a house, we must ask ourselves, does this review offer a real transformative path for Namibians, or is it merely a patchwork of adjustments that will keep our citizens perpetually on the edge of survival? Honorable Speaker, the global economic landscape, as projected by the International Monetary Fund, anticipates a modest growth rate of 3.2% for both 2024 and 2025, a minor dip from the 3.3% of 2023. While this outlook rests on hopes of global disinflation and adjustments in monetary policy, we cannot, Honorable Speaker, afford to place our trust in optimistic forecasts alone. The world economy, Honorable Speaker, stands on precarious ground, threatened by volatility in commodity prices that could wreak havoc on vulnerable economies like ours by escalating regional conflicts and by a looming slowdown in the Chinese economy, which would reverberate through global markets. Moreover, the rise of protectionist policies poses a serious risk to Namibia's trade-driven growth, potentially undermining our economic stability. We must acutely be aware of these risks and act decisively to protect our people and economy from the impacts of global instability rather than waiting for them to reach our shores. Honorable Speaker, of particular concern is the weakness in the diamond sector, which has significantly impacted our revenue projections. The Minister has just reported a downward revision of expected revenues from the diamond sector by more than 2.3 billion for the financial year 2024-2025. This vulnerability to commodity price fluctuations underscores the urgent need for economic diversification to reduce our dependence on extractive industries. On the domestic front, Honorable Speaker, while our economy shows commendable resilience amid global vulnerabilities and severe weather conditions, we must confront the reality behind the revised growth forecast, a tempered 3.6% for 2024, with hopes for a climb to 5.4% in 2025. This downward revision from earlier forecasts is a stark acknowledgement of the serious weaknesses in our diamond sector and the crippling effects of drought on agricultural production. These numbers, however, are not merely statistics, Honorable Speaker. They signify a call to action to protect and rejuvenate critical industries that underpin our economic stability. Yes, the secondary and tertiary industries show promise, bolstered by gains in electricity and water generation, alongside strong consumer demand. But this budding diversification cannot afford complacency. We must urgently amplify our investment and policy support in these sectors if we are to achieve resilient, long-term growth. Regionally, Honorable Speaker, with Sub-Saharan Africa's growth forecast holding steady at 3.3% for 2023 and 2024.
Speaker, what is happening?
Yes. Yes, I'm trying to get the technician to assist. Yes.
Comrade Speaker, normally all the years, maybe because of time now, normally if a person is a shadow minister of finance, listen what the Minister of Finance has tabled, and when he or she speaks, make comment reference to the speech of the minister. That is normally what should be done. But because of time, maybe the honourable member could have get a copy of the speech and then comment on what the minister said. That has been the practice all along. That's why all the years, if the Minister of Finance speaks, the person finance minister, that person asks for adjournment to study the speech of the minister. But this is just a different speech from what that's the procedure normally.
Yeah. Can I remind the honorable member, we are dealing with this midterm budget review as an urgent bill, and therefore we have to do everything in one day. So the honorable members are responding in a very constructive way because of the time constraint. So I think we should allow her to continue to finish because I've got other members to. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Perhaps I need to clarify two things. One is that I was assigned by my party, the Popular Democratic Movement, Honorable Speaker, to respond on behalf of the party and as a collective to Honorable Shiimi's statement. Two, I have had extensive time to study both the statement tabled this afternoon as well as the book as well from the Ministry of Finance. So, Honorable Tate Jerry, please, all is in order and you do not need to worry about anything.
Relax.
Yes, Honorable Speaker, as I was saying, regionally, with Sub-Saharan Africa's growth forecast holding steady at 3.3% of 2023 and 2024, and expected to rise to 4.2% in 2025, Namibia sits at crossroads. This outlook presents both an opportunity and a challenge. Can we harness economic cooperation within the Southern African Customs Union to fortify our economy, or will we be swept aside by a regional dynamic that may serve some while excluding others? I must also mention here, Honorable Speaker, Honorable Nakundi, welcome back, that my undergraduate thesis was on the impact of regional integration in Southern Africa, with a special focus on Namibia's industrial development through its membership to SACU. So yes, not only am I a graduate of political science, but I'm also a graduate of economics. Honorable Speaker, the choices we make now will determine whether Namibia claims its rightful place in the regional economic landscape or continues to contend with marginal gains amidst formidable pressures. On the upside, if economies in the customs union are growing, there could be greater demand for Namibian goods, boosting trade, jobs, and income in Namibia. On the downside, however, steady or moderate growth could also suggest that big changes may not happen immediately, meaning Namibia needs to stay competitive and productive to benefit from this environment. In short, Honorable Speaker, steady growth in the region might help Namibia economically, but it also means Namibia has to stay on its toes to maximize these benefits. Honorable Speaker, allow me to commend the Minister for the fiscal discipline demonstrated in the past financial year. The actual budget deficit of 2.4% of GDP for the financial year 2023-2024 is a significant improvement from the revised projections of 3.2% and the 5.2% recorded in the preceding financial year. This fiscal consolidation is crucial for our long-term economic stability. While we welcome the upward revision of total revenues by 1.7 billion to 92.1 billion for the financial year 2024-2025, this moment calls for rigorous scrutiny, not celebration, Honorable Shiimi. The reality remains that our development budget execution rate, sitting at a dismal 37.4% halfway through the fiscal year, is not just disappointing. It is a glaring failure that hampers our potential for sustainable growth and delays the delivery of public services. Honorable Minister, it is about time that we introduced and implemented with speed accountability tools for this chronic underspending. The funds intended for crucial infrastructure projects are not there to gather dust. They are allocated with the purpose of transforming lives, creating jobs, and spurring economic development. Yet here we are, Honourable Minister, with substantial sums left unspent due to what can only be described as inefficiencies, bureaucratic inertia, and an evident lack of urgency.
Sure.
Now, Honourable Speaker, the Minister's acknowledgement of revenue risks tied to volatile SACU incomes and a faltering diamond sector is necessary, but caution alone is not a strategy. We need a well-defined, resilient fiscal approach that shields our economy from external shocks and prevents over-reliance on unstable revenue streams. This includes fast-tracking policies that encourage private sector growth, diversifying our tax base, and setting enforceable accountability measures for those responsible for implementing the national budget. Honourable Speaker, to continue with low execution rates and missed development targets not only fails our economy, but fails the Namibian people who rely on us to deliver. It is time to turn words into action, prioritizing execution, effectiveness over complacency. The era of excuses must end, Honourable Speaker. Our people demand results, and it is our duty to deliver nothing less, Honourable Minister. The drought crisis demands immediate and decisive action. The 698.8 million allocation for drought relief provisions, while commendable, Honourable Minister, is woefully inadequate given the catastrophic scale of this disaster. Our farmers are facing unprecedented challenges, with many on the brink of financial ruin. As reported in the Namibian Sun, farmers in the Kunene region alone have lost over 60% of their livestock due to the prolonged drought. This is a report by the Namibian Sun. This is not just a statistic. It represents shattered livelihoods and a threat to our national food security. We must dramatically increase support for drought-stricken farmers. This includes not only emergency relief, but also long-term investments in climate-resilient agriculture. The Namibia economist recently highlighted that without significant intervention, the agricultural sector faces potential collapse in drought-affected regions. We cannot afford to let this happen. The housing crisis in our urban areas is equally dire and demands immediate action. The current situation, where hard-working Namibians struggle to find affordable housing, is unacceptable and unsustainable. We must prioritize the development of affordable housing solutions in our urban areas. This requires bold action, including substantial resource allocation and targeted support for low-income households. We need a comprehensive long-term strategy that includes urban planning reforms, zoning changes to promote higher density development, and innovative financing mechanisms to make home ownership accessible to all. The time for half measures and incremental changes has passed. Our citizens, Honourable Minister, deserve decisive action to address this crisis. We must act now to secure a stable, prosperous future for all Namibians. The allocation, Honourable Speaker, of 139 million to extend the conditional basic income grant to additional qualifying beneficiaries in urban localities is a positive move towards addressing urban poverty. However, we must also ensure that this program is sustainable and effectively targeted, and that intended beneficiaries do actually receive the grant. The additional 1 billion allocated to various ministries for goods and services raises questions about the initial budgeting process. While some of these allocations address critical needs, such as health emergencies and education, we must also scrutinize whether these represent genuine unforeseen circumstances or shortcomings in our budget planning. Honourable Shiimi, how is it possible that the Electoral Commission of Namibia falls short of its initial allocation by 200 million? An institution that is constitutionally mandated to facilitate and ensure the exercise of a constitutional right, which is to vote, that has known since 10 years ago, since the last election, that we're going to have elections in 2024. How is it possible that an institution of this nature falls short by 200 million Namibian dollars? Is it that the ECN did not know that we're having elections in 2024? How is it possible that we exceed the amounts allocated to us as an institution by at least 200 million? Such an important figure and a huge figure, Honourable Speaker. The Minister reports a reduction in the total public debt stock from 65.1% of GDP in the financial year 2023-2024 to an estimated 62.1% in the financial year 2024-2025. While this trend is positive, we must remain vigilant. The projected debt ratio of 57.8% by the end of the MTEF period is still high by historical standards and leaves little fiscal space to respond to future shocks. Honourable Speaker, I must also commend the Minister's commitment to addressing our economic policy priorities, particularly through the introduction of tax relief measures, the tax amnesty program, and initiatives in housing and education. These are indeed constructive steps. However, to achieve meaningful economic transformation, it is also essential that we adopt a more ambitious pace and deepen the scope of these reforms. It is concerning, Honourable Minister, that the progress on urban land servicing, as well as the rollout of prepaid water and electricity meters, has been protracted. Such delays have real consequences for the quality of life of our citizens and create barriers to urban economic development, which is essential for Namibia's growth and prosperity. Similarly, while I acknowledge the commendable efforts to improve water infrastructure in rural areas, particularly in light of our recurrent drought conditions, it is also imperative that we accelerate these projects. Further, we should actively explore innovative approaches to ensure long-term water security for our communities. Let us, Honourable Speaker, commit to reforms that not only address immediate needs, but lay the foundation for a robust, resilient economy and genuinely benefits all Namibians. The expansion of rural electrification is crucial for the equitable development, but the pace seems slow given our national ambitions. We need to explore, Honourable Minister, more aggressive strategies, including public-private partnerships to achieve universal electrification. Honourable Speaker, Honourable Members, after reviewing the Minister's speech and the medium-term expenditure framework, I cannot help but ask the following questions. One, how will this budget review alleviate the relentless financial assault on Namibian households? With inflation still a persistent force, even at a reduced rate, ordinary Namibian citizens cannot absorb the relentless rises in basic food, electricity, and transportation costs. Is there a concrete plan, Honourable Minister, to shield household incomes, or is economic recovery only an aspiration for those at the top? Two, drought relief programs, are they reaching the people who need them the most, or do they vanish into layers of bureaucracy? While drought is a recurring tragedy for Namibians, are we truly prepared to act, or will our citizens in rural and remote areas once again bear the brunt, deprived of timely and effective assistance? What mechanisms are in place to ensure drought relief is delivered transparently, accountably, and directly to those suffering? Three, with key sectors like mining and agriculture underperforming, where is the proactive vision to unlock new economic engines? This budget review seems to depend on hope rather than actionable strategies. What targeted interventions are in place to diversify our economy? Where is the support of sectors that can stimulate real job creation, secure incomes, and reduce our reliance on external forces? For indebted households, what relief is being proposed beyond promises and projections? Namibians are trapped under personal debt at levels that cripple their economic mobility and well-being. While we boast of a stabilized debt-to-GDP ratio, how do we reconcile that with the crippling debts weighing down households? What tangible support, Honourable Prime Minister, mechanisms are in place to free citizens from the cycle of financial bondage? 5, where is the immediate action for small and medium enterprises, Honourable Shiimi, who are the backbone of our economy? With the low execution rate on development budgets that were meant to propel business growth, is the government truly committed to seeing SMEs succeed? Where is the urgency, Honourable Alwendo, in unlocking funding, reducing barriers, and expanding access to the capital that our entrepreneurs desperately need to thrive? Honourable Speaker, I will thank you and also end there.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed.
My other page is not here. Oh, it's here.
I'm entitled to commend all of you on a day like this, recognizing the fact that we have time constraint, but willingness to make progress. I really commend all members of the House who are here, because we were trying to cut down on the intervention, and I think, is that what you are indicating to me that you are willing to do? Not long intervention, but perhaps just briefly, so that we can make progress? Is that it? On Bumotu?
Honourable Speaker, I must say that you now have put me on pressure, but I'll try and be fast. Firstly, I would like to thank the Honourable Minister Shiimi for our tax refunds. It has helped a lot of Namibians. It must be elections every year because this is very nice. It's a good benefit for the year. Now, in short, Honourable Speaker, allow me to start my speech with a radical quote from a renowned American philosopher and political activist, Cornel West, who states that true democracy is never achieved by passive acceptance of inadequate policies, but by the relentless pursuit of justice, equality, and the courage to challenge the status quo. Firstly, I would like to thank and give tribute to the Namibian Statistics Agency, whose data from the census crafted my arguments that reflect the realities of the most vulnerable in society. During the census, the NSA managed to train 20,000 young people, of which 13,000 were meaningfully employed. However, in alignment with this, allow me to express my disappointment for the delayed unemployment report that is said to be released after elections, thus sparking mistrust within the system as it allows government to manipulate the narrative, leaving voters in the dark about the true state of our economy and silencing the voices of the unemployed. Additionally, without important statistics such as that, how will lawmakers be able to effectively produce policy alternatives towards the budget that will address the growing unemployment crisis? Now, with this economic priorities is my main focus that I will look into. There is little more than a band-aid on the wound that requires serious transformation. For far too long, we have been promised solutions to social and economic injustice that burden our lives every day as Namibians. But at a closer look at this review, we can see the same hollow promises and the same lack of real change. I'll start with housing. The promise of shelters remains an empty promise. Honourable Minister, the mention of the 2023 National Housing Policy implementation is recommendable, but with new committees and project units sounds impressive, but where are the results? Namibians are tired of end planning with no delivery. Currently, statistics show that 40.2% of urban households that live in informal housing units. Therefore, it demands more committees and steering structures. In short, we need more houses. The people deserve more than an empty land without infrastructure. They need real housing developments built on a timeline that respects the urgency of their needs. Honourable Speaker, I also recommend you on some of the initiatives that you placed on mortgages. That was a core problem to the backlog in our country, especially when you dealt with the high interest rates that were felt by first-time homeowners. But however, I'd like to highlight that there's still the largest concentration of backlog that exists among the lowest income groups, of from 0 to 1,500 Namibian dollars and 1,500 to 4,600, with a combined of total 75,000 units. It can then be inferred that developers are continuously capitalizing on the exclusion of these demographic segments by disregarding the need for more affordable houses. Furthermore, Honourable Shiimi, perhaps you should make more proactively collaboration with some financial institutions to explore viable strategies for integrating these underserved communities who are still constantly excluded within the housing system. Now, in education, the approach needs to go beyond classrooms. It needs to look at opportunities. The review's allocation, and when you stated that it aims to construct 512 classrooms, is commendable on surface. Yet, it barely scratches the surface of what is needed. The issue is not the construction of classrooms only, but there is a need for transformation of our education system that fails to prepare young people for a competitive and modern economy. Our youth need skills for tomorrow's economy, not just physical infrastructure, but digital access, updated curricula, and all the above that is needed when it comes to education to lead to real opportunities. Now, I look into the early childhood development. For the early childhood development for children aged 0 to 5 years old, it states that 80% of children are not attending childhood development in both 2011 census and 2023 census. It has remained the same. Now, there are various issues that were highlighted, 80% of it being that most children from ages 0 to 5 are too young to attend school, but the rest are that 5% out of this amount is due to distance, lack of infrastructure, and there's a 10.3% due to financial constraints. Again, another issue that has been ignored within our education system is the urgent need for an intervention for children living with disabilities. They have been systematically excluded in the education system, which is a human right and should be highlighted in one of your aims to create a much more accessible education system. However, Honorable Speaker, allow me to highlight that I was fortunate to embark on a diplomatic mission with the subcommittee on HR last week. It was aimed to scrutinize Zimbabwe's education system and learn from its successes. A report is due to be tabled in Parliament, but allow me to highlight the Heritage 5.0 curriculum targets a more skill-based approach to foster industrialization. We were very much in awe when we looked at how Zimbabwe's education system has led to them also making their own sanitizers, for example. They have recently also, through NASA, have launched their first satellite. So their education system is very much advanced. Therefore, Honorable Minister, why are we content with merely addressing basic needs when the future demands much more? The results of the literacy rate dropping from 89.0% in 2011 to 87.3% in 2023 is a result of this lack, and there must be a transformation. We cannot have this decline in our literacy rate because it affects the quality of citizens that we set out in the world. On agriculture, Honorable Minister, this budget and this review should aim for self-sufficiency and resilience, not just survival. Our agricultural sector needs support that fosters innovation, promotes sustainable practices, and reduces dependency on imported food. How can we talk about food security when our farmers struggle to make ends meet? There are an accumulation from below approach that is needed to target small-scale farmers. Namibia's agriculture requires a radical reform and support, not just drought relief, which is important, but a proactive vision for long-term resilience. Now, in electrification and energy security, you have mentioned that there is an ambition of the universal electrification by 2040. Sounds promising as well. But we are more than a decade away, and the progress, as alluded by my sister Honorable Hengari, remains slow. The connection that you said of 18 public institutions and 88 houses is simply not progressive if you want to reach this goal within the universal electrification. Now, within SME support and economic growth, the Small and Medium Enterprise Loan Scheme and Green Credit Facility are positive steps. And let us be clear, it is just not enough. The SMEs are the lifeblood of economic development, yet they remain underserved and undersupported. Honourable Minister, how can we claim to support these businesses when they still face immense barriers in accessing financial markets and skill development? Namibia's economic growth depends on SME, but without meaningful investment and reform, we are stifling the very engine of our economy. In conclusion, Honourable Speaker, we demand transformation. This review must look at opportunities to bring about real change. Concurrently, it falls short in delivering the bold transformative solutions that Namibians need. Our people are not just asking for handouts. They are demanding justice, dignity, and a government that prioritizes their well-being over empty rhetoric.
Okay.
I so submit.
Thank you very much. I really want us to be as brief as possible so that we can make progress. I didn't even refer to the time allocated to you, but because I thought this is common sense. Common sense would dictate that we should move rapidly. Honorable Katamelo, last on my list, and then we move on.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I think I must commend the Honorable Minister under the tough economic conditions for at least attempting to do something. I was fortunate, sometimes if it was Monday, I was not going to have his speech, but I had his speech. And I underline. Come again? Yeah, no, I'm okay, sorry. I'm just saying I had a speech and I'm fortunate. No. Speaker, protect me. If you want to speak, just take the floor.
Yeah. The interjection would not help us, really.
Okay, let me be short.
It's on
my minister's speech have got 15. I have underlined the word drought, which is used more than 15 times, and also indicate the tough, stringent measures in which we find ourselves. And before I come to a question, but maybe commend him for the inflation, that in 2023 was 5.9 and has moved downwards now to 3.4. But one of the biggest challenges that we have and that we face is the 60% debt of GDP that we are facing. And I mean, that translates to a summary of servicing 12.4 billion towards our debt and an increased operational budget of 78.2 billion and a reduced development budget of 10.4 billion. But a note there is to say our debt service has become higher than our developmental budget. And also he has alluded to it in terms of our execution rate. Now, I was guided actually, I had a lot of issues, but due to the time, I just wanted to read to the minister and say, on page 12, the National Disaster Unit in the Office of the Prime Minister continue to roll out a drought relief program to affect regions and communities at a cost of 129 million per month. In addition, through the Agricultural Bank of Namibia, we have rolled out a dedicated subsidy program to support farmers whose operations have been severely affected by drought conditions at a cost of 126.3 million during the current financial year. Now, I know what has happened, but all I wanted to say is maybe the minister, as the custodian of the fiscus of this country, must enlighten also the House about the conditions that he has put in place in terms of this assistance, so that the House is maybe also empowered to understand that within regard of the drought that we are saying is affecting cross-country over the country, there are certain conditions that he has put, which I am of the firm belief is not in the best interest of the farmers and the time that we are doing. I stop short of that. As I said, maybe there are issues I can elaborate, but I understand the time in which we find ourselves, and maybe read something to say I put this on the backdrop of the oath that we have taken and the preamble of the Constitution that says, and the vow that we have taken, as contained in the preamble of our Constitution, that committed to these principles, we have resolved to constitute the Republic of Namibia as a sovereign, secular, democratic and unitary state of Namibia. As a sovereign, democratic and unitary state for all its citizens, in the execution of it, applied by the principles of justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. Justice. Justice. And most importantly, justice. And when I'm entrusted with a position, I should be able to execute this, not at the detriment of trying to punish others. Because the power that you inherit here today is the power that you have on your behalf, on my behalf, on behalf of the other Africans who cannot represent themselves. And when we take decisions, we should be guided by those principles. I stop short of that.
Thank you very much. That's said and done.
No, if I'm allowed, I can take on the decision if the members want.
No. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
That's what I'm saying. I stopped short because I said the minister. I did not say the decision. I say there are conditions that were put. And that's what I'm saying.
Honorable. Yes, please. Conclude.
That's why I'm saying, and it's for the safeguard of the times in which we find ourselves. And that's why I'm saying it will be in the, I'm just saying, now that you have said the 126, the 126 is given to Agribank, I'm saying there is a condition that was attached. Can the House be enlightened of those conditions so that moving forward, we are able to know as a House, as people who have experienced, because the way it reads here, through Agribank to have rolled out to dedicated subsidy to support farmers. But it's not all farmers that are benefiting.
Okay.
Yeah, there are certain farmers that were disqualified.
Well,
yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm a farmer as well.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think let's leave it there. Due to time constraint, honestly, we need to make progress. And I'm not asking the minister for his reply.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Let me also thank the honorable members who took the floor to contribute the discussion. Although they didn't have much time to digest the speech, we appreciate the comments that they have made, and that will help us to strengthen our budgeting process going forward. I'm not going to answer the questions one by one, but I think just to provide clarity on some of the issues that have been raised. I believe Honorable Hengari is asking about, what is in this amendment bill that is shielding households. So one thing I want to clarify is that an amendment bill is not the main budget. So policy statements are made, the key policy issues are made in the main budget. That is coming in February next year. So this is basically a continuation of the budget that we have presented in February this year. So we are now making adjustments to take account of emergencies. So the midterm budget is really for emergencies. It's not a new budget. And we want to discourage people to think that this is a new budget. This is a continuation of the budget that we have already tabled, but we are now making some adjustments to take account of the emergencies that cropped up during the year that were not foreseen at the beginning of the year when we tabled the main budget. With regard to households, I believe we have already provided measures in the main budget that provide relief to households. A number of them. We have, for instance, promised that we are going to adjust the Transfer Duty Act, and that has been done. And the idea was really to provide relief to households when they want to acquire properties, to pay less transfer fees. In fact, those who are below a certain level or those who are going to buy properties below a certain price, they are not going to pay any duty at all. Such a relief to the households, and that has been done. The amendment to the Transfer Duty Act was done, and once again, I want to thank this House for supporting that idea and for passing that amendment bill. We have also, I think Honorable Mutu has referred to it, that we have also promised in the main budget that we are going to adjust the tax threshold to provide further relief. And I believe most of you have felt this relief because you have received your tax refunds. So this was not a joke, it's a reality and it's delivered. So those are the kind of relief that we are talking about. Yeah. So we have also mentioned that the VAT registration rate is going to be increased so that we can provide some support to SMEs, because we don't want to overburden them with registrations. So again, that's something that we have already announced in the main budget, and it's under implementation. We have also, and I have mentioned it in my speech a few minutes ago, that we are committed to adjust the tax brackets going forward, so that we take account of inflation going forward, and that's going to inject money in the hands of households to the tune of about 700 million going forward. So these are the measures that we are putting in place to try and support households to cope with pressure, especially price pressure that is caused by inflation, which is a global problem. But fortunately, we have started to see inflation easing. That's why the central bank was able to reduce interest rates. That's another relief measure that has been provided. So this is a package that we have to think about, and we have to look at them as a package. They are not done in isolation. They are done to provide relief to households so that they can cope with this difficult environment. With regard to housing, and again the comments on housing, well taken, and I believe housing is a big priority for government. That's why government decided to go to the drawing board to revise the housing policy, and the idea was really to find a better approach that is going to help government to make an impact on housing delivery. So, and that's what the new housing policy is all about. So, Honorable Speaker, I apologize earlier for coming late. One of the things that we were discussing in our committee is basically implementation of that revised housing policy. The numbers that have been quoted here, how do we fast track the delivery of housing? So that's a priority that government is looking at. It's a priority that government is addressing. That's why you see the budget has also been aligned to fund that priority. So we have provided an additional of about 500 million in the budget to support that priority, and that commitment is there going forward. So we, of course, this new approach of having, a unit that is going to help the ministry to implement. It's a new approach, and again, it's in recognition of the fact that if we do it in a business as usual way, we're not going to make much progress. That's why the ministry has put up an implementation unit that is just going to focus on a day-to-day basis on the implementation of this new policy. So I believe if we continue to support the minister, we will see a big difference in the delivery of housing. When it comes to education, Honorable Mutu now has left. Again, government is looking at this not as a project to build new classrooms. The conference, the housing conference, has come up with a number of recommendations, a number of objectives that have been set. And after that conference, ministry then went back to the drawing board to see what are the key priorities that we need to put in our implementation plan. And there is now an implementation plan. Again, that is one of the things we're discussing this morning. The ministry was reporting back, and I think there's some good progress there. And it's not only looking at classrooms. I only gave you, progress on classrooms. Classroom is one, because we have to upgrade school infrastructure. She has talked about ECDs. One of the reasons why we are not able to roll out ECDs countrywide is because of a lack of classrooms for ECDs, or especially for pre-primary schools, not the ECD, pre-primary schools. So some of the classes that are being built is actually for pre-primary schools. So the strategy on education it's about transforming the education sector. So it's building classrooms for pre-primary schools learners, but also classrooms and hostels in general, so that we address the issue of overcrowded classes in some areas. But pre-primary schools definitely is one of those priorities in terms of that plan. It's also looking at improving and increasing digital infrastructure. That's one of the goals that this new plan is addressing. So it's not only about fiscal infrastructure, but it's also about digital infrastructure. So again, we have seen this morning the rollout in terms of computers that have been given to schools as part of the objective of rolling out digital infrastructure in schools to improve digital literacy of our learners. So that's one of the things that are being implemented. It's also looking at how do we improve the quality of teachers. So through training and development. So it's also an aspect of that implementation plan. It's also looking at professionalizing the teaching profession. In fact, there's a bill that is on its way to the Cabinet Committee on Social Services to enable the ministry to establish the teaching profession as a profession. Yeah, so I believe that bill, once it has been discussed and approved at different levels, it will come to Parliament so that we can strengthen the teaching profession as a profession for us to be able to deliver quality teaching in our schools. So that, Honorable Mutu, you were not here when I was saying that the focus on education is not about infrastructure only. It's about transforming the education sector, looking at different aspects. And in fact, it has different targets. For instance, it says by this year we want to have so many learners in preschools. By this year we want to reduce the failure rate to this level. All those things are in that plan. So it's quite a comprehensive plan. So now we just need to help the ministry to implement that plan. On agriculture, again, agriculture very, very important. I think we all agree that we need to improve our agricultural production. That's why, apart from the money that goes to agriculture in a normal way, we are also going to make an additional 430 million to green schemes this year. Part of the money was already given for the winter crops, 200 million. 230 is in this amendment bill for the summer crop. So the idea is really to improve food production in the country so that we reduce the import or import of food from outside. But that is just one of the programs that is targeting, support to the agricultural sector. Again, support to agriculture. Honorable Katamelo has talked about the money that government is making available to support farmers, like the Honorable Speaker. This support or this relief program is really recognizing the fact that farmers have been adversely affected by the drought. And therefore, we need to give them relief in terms of their of reducing the amount of money that they are paying the agricultural bank. In other words, your installments to the agricultural bank is suspended, and therefore government is paying on your behalf as a farmer. If you have a loan with Agribank, that's how that program works. So yes, Honorable Katamelo talked about the condition. There is a condition, yes, because the principle is that we want to help farmers and we want to encourage farmers to continue to be good citizens. So if you were paying your loans before the drought came, you will be recognized, and therefore you'll benefit from this support. So the condition that has been put in place, the condition that was put in place was that you need to be in good standing. In other words, you should have been able to be up to date with your payments with Agribank up to the 31st of March this year. Then we started discussing with the farmers. There are regular interactions with farmers. Farmers were saying drought did not only start this year, and therefore we cannot use March 2024 as a starting point. Drought started earlier, so maybe we need to stretch it going backwards. So that has indeed now been accepted and approved. So we are now saying that all the farmers that have been up to date up to 2023 can benefit from this program, and therefore their repayments will be, for this year, will be suspended. They will only pay after this year if the program doesn't continue. So that's the condition that Honorable Katamelo is talking about. It has been discussed with the farmers. It has been agreed that it must be stretched back to 2023 instead of 2024. So, and I believe the last meeting that we had with farmers was about 2 weeks ago, and I believe we departed from that meeting on a good spirit, and I believe we are on the same page there. Obviously, farmers were saying we also need, going forward, we also need to look at crop farmers, not only livestock farmers. But what we have also been saying is that, of course, the resources are limited, but crop farmers also have got land loans. So they also borrow from the agricultural bank to buy farms where they cultivate their crops. And therefore, if they have land loans, they are going to benefit from this scheme. And therefore, it's not excluding the crop farmers unless they don't have land loans. But going forward, of course, we will also then consider those who do not have land loans if resource permits going forward. Honorable Speaker, I believe I have covered most of the issues that have been raised by my colleagues. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much
for those useful comments.
Thank you very much. We do welcome that element of flexibility. I hope it goes further and satisfy everybody. I now put the question that the bill be read a second time. Any objection? Then it's agreed to. Thank you very much. The Secretary will read the bill a second time.
Appropriation Amendment Bill.
Does the Honorable Finance and Public Enterprises Minister moved that the Assembly now goes into committee?
I so move, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you very much. It is moved that I leave the chair. Any objection? Who seconds? It is agreed to. I now call on the Deputy Chairperson of the House Committee to take the chair.
Set. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
That is around. Just went quickly to check. The Honorable members, the whole House Committee has to consider the Appropriation Amendment Bill. I put clause 1. Any discussions? Any objections? Agreed to. I put clause 2. Any discussion? Any objections? Agreed to. I put the schedule. Any discussions? Any objections? Agreed to. I shall report the bill without amendments.
30th, I think. Okay.
Honorable Speaker, the committee has gone through the Bill B16/2024 as set forth in the accompanying copy and agreed to it without amendments.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Does the Honorable Minister of Finance and Public Enterprise move that the bill now be read a third time?
I so move, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Any objection? No. Who seconds? Agree to? Any further discussion? Does the Honorable Minister of Finance and Public Enterprises wish to reply?
Yes, Honorable Speaker. I wish to reply. I wish to thank all the honorable members for their support and their input. As I said before, we will take some of those inputs into account going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That brings me to the stage when I now had to put the question that the bill be now read a third time. Any objection? No. Agree to? Yes. The Secretary will read the bill a third time.
Appropriation Amendment Bill.
I think we are done. We go for tea. We come back. No, I think we are done. Sorry. Yeah. Honorable members, we are not yet done. We have a special announcement. Well, I'm now going to basically say the word thank you does not sufficiently convey, and I just want to commend you for having turned up this afternoon to do the job that is require all our collective efforts. It is now done. It is to the satisfaction of everyone, not only members in this House, but the country-wide as well. That's number two. We are going to adjourn and reconvene on the 4th of February 2025. Lastly, all what is left for me is to request the Right Honorable Prime Minister to adjourn the House.
I would like to join you in thanking everyone for making today possible, that we can finalize the discussion on the budget and have the budget passed. And I'm happy that we now can all rise and go and continue with our political activities, in addition to our public duties in furtherance of our democracy and political pluralism. And I hope that we are going to do that in the usual Namibian way, where we exercise our rights and also respect the rights of others, and that we are going here to deliver on the wishes of the Namibian people by making sure that SWAPO has 2/3 majority.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
I wish everyone the very best, but victory I wish only to SWAPO. So thank you very much. Let's all be safe in God's hands and return health next year.
Thank you very much. Let me tell you, this is, I at my age now, I really pay attention to the way how we are perceived. Having just returned home recently, wherever I've been to, I don't need to mention names, we are regarded as one of the most peaceful countries on the African continent. Peaceful and stable. And that is not only, it's an honor, it's for our collective being. And that is very important. We preserve that. We hang on to that, because that is what defines who we are. That's said and done. The House stands adjourned until February.
Once again, we have a bigger responsibility to this republic called Namibia, maintaining the peace and stability that we enjoy, and that we need to, of course, embody that as the political parties are going into the election gears as we speak. But nonetheless, we're coming back, and we're still joined here by Mrs. Chantal Hasselman from PwC. That is a senior country representative, and of course also that's Mr. Rodney Ngwaib, who's an economic researcher, to just reflect on this as well. Let me start off with you, Mrs. Hasselman. Any surprises from the review statement?
If I start more in terms of the upside.
The upside. Yes.
In terms of the three pillars mentioned from the 24-25 budget tabled in February, definitely ticks in terms of maintaining fiscal prudence, as well as focus on empowering local households that we've already seen in terms of the reduction in tax rates. However, what is concerning is the second year in a row, or maybe past trends also indicate that, where the development budget would sort of like be last in line, taking from the development budget in terms of reallocations, not as much as last year this time, but it's still evident in the play out, and having that reallocated in terms of current needs expressed. So in terms of having productive spending, which was sort of the third pillar in terms of the focus for the current year under review, I think it is thought-provoking, and a lot of conversation around that is needed.
It's quite needed. Mr. Ngwaib, from your end, any surprises that you picked up?
Yes. I should say that apart from the prudential methods that we are following in the fiscal prudence, the budget deficit of 5.6 billion expected. We don't know where we are going in future or how the expectation in February may be. The interest repayments still remaining at 12 billion, still a little bit high. Somehow, I was expecting it to be a little bit lower, considering that our debt level is at 10 billion at average, and to cover the annual deficit comes around at 10 billion. So we're a little bit over with $2 billion. The operations budget at 69 billion. That's a little bit high at the moment, considering the quarter that we are in the year. Yeah. And then with the operations, I believe that that at least if efficiency can be attained in that budget, then it is fine in terms of broadening the revenue collection and also attainment of revenue. But considering the investment, the industrial space or the landscape of the industrial performance, we should have really looked at aligning it a little bit also in terms of our operational expenses of 69 billion. And the revenue collection at 81 billion is also a good figure, quite very steady, and an increase in that sense, which means there's positive highlight. But what I would like to reflect on is that our current debt at 153 billion, that does not encapsulate as one of the pillars, apart from infrastructure and fiscal prudence or fiscal prudence, we have excluded something that is also core. It is which is inequality, poverty eradication, and dealing with the impending drought or food production. And I believe that we should reflect a little bit also in terms of aligning the spectrum of right-wing, left-wing achievements or attainments in our goals, that we must be deliberate in bringing out. And I believe that it was one of the pillars 2 years ago, and especially in the juncture where we are in terms of election, in the election preparedness, unemployment remains a key highlight, as well as inequality remains a key highlight, and also dealing with the impending drought or the food production aspect. And that is what I wanted to see more in terms of the budget.
And that was really, from my end as well, in terms of, because we know that this is also an opportunity to reallocate, looking at some of the emergencies that are coming up. And one would have expected, drought relief to really feature much more prominently, and probably a little bit more serious intervention on that part. What are your thoughts on that?
What was given through is additional circa 700 million allocation. That is on top of 77 million that's been awarded already with the original speech via initiatives by Agribank. With, I think, at the stage where we are, and the fact that farmers would also tell you, even if it rains, it doesn't rain grass. So that is the state of affairs, and that is the urgency in the matter. So whatever is allocated, to me what's most important is the effective allocation thereof, the effective spending thereof, and reaching where the need is.
So it can be 700 million, but it depends on the effectiveness of that. Will depend on how
the governance around that and the urgency around that to make sure that it gets to where the need is at the moment.
Rodney?
I want to add on that point. If drought relief or any other endeavors we have to combat that should not be used to import food in that regard. We should look at it as a sustainable food production model. And I believe such a model would have been robust by now, especially after 34 years that we are having our government as a tool for resolving this type of endemic poverty and lack of food and scarcity of it. Because there are towns and regions, whenever they expect to hear anything from budget allocation, they want to understand how this can bring grassroots change into the different avenues where they are. And they want the government to outgrow certain elements of expenditure. And I believe when we have next year, and probably when we have a different conversation about how we govern the budget and how we allocate and plan it, that we can integrate the existing operations more into tangible food-solving solutions. There are a few highlights, and there are really key elements of this discussion or topic that can be broadened. And I know, for example, if we make it a national goal and a national objective, we can align the right resources. For example, we should align 30% of our budget, 40% of our budget, and all of these should go to strategies that can reinvent and also reward the government back. And I know for a fact there are farmers who just need the right resources. They have the skills. They need the right equipment. They need the right financial resources. And they don't want to go the conventional way of depending only on loans that are very risk prone. And I believe that we should strengthen our direct agricultural benefits, not in a way of grants, but in a way of rewarding mechanisms. And we should be proactive or a little bit creative in our approach.
In terms of what we do with regards to that. Another one which I wanted to really ask to quickly reflect on was we know that the demographic dividend in the country is really leaned towards the youth. We've just found out today they comprise of about 71.1% of the population is under 35. We saw in the speech now, the minister, of course, pointing out that youth development and particularly SMEs, small and medium enterprises for young people should be the focus, with some facilities, of course, being increased there as well. Also mentioned support for the Environmental Investment Fund and the credit scheme that they've also been running. Just briefly reflect on how important it is for us to always have the youth in that discussion, and perhaps whether we can still do a little bit more to bring them into the mainstream fold with targeted interventions.
Well, a lot has been mentioned in terms of economic reforms that's focused on the youth, and also in terms of combination between public and private. For example, the commercial banks also coming forth in terms of the credit guarantee scheme, which was also mentioned. It is, again, it comes back to mobilization in terms of how that benefits can flow through, and how sustaining it also is in terms of the interventions that come forth. From the tax space specifically, what was not mentioned again was previous announcement of a possible reduction in corporate tax rate for SMEs. So that in itself would require, it's not the first time that this sort of proposal has been mentioned. In previous speeches, it did come up as perhaps a revenue tax. This time, not exactly the same, but all alluding to giving much needed relief to SMEs. But that policy development needs a lot of research and stakeholder engagement for a time where we need mobilization. We need action on it. But also with policy development, the onerous responsibility of making sure that it is easy to understand and it has clarity, and specifically when it comes to SMEs, where a lot of taxpayer education and boosting payment morality is crucial.
I'm sure, Rodney, you've got a word or two for us there, particularly on the youth demographic dividend. In
terms of the youth demographic, the breakdown of that segment is that if you look at the ages of 25 to 35, you find that the employment pool has a figure of below 100,000, right about 90,000 of individuals per head count that are employed in that segment. So the total value or the aggregate value in that would be around 300,000 people under the age of 35 are employed or in the employed sector. That puts them in a very linear segment. However, if we can tackle it heads on, it will be a risk approach because they do not have the direct resources to just the skills that is required, the financial backing that is required. They belong still within the cross-subsidized segment of our economy, meaning that the money has to come from different other avenues to fund their well-being or fit in within the economy. The economy is looking for businesses that are well established. They are looking for people with broader skills. They are looking for specialized skills. And this is where in Namibia that you find a high degree of expatriates filling the gaps of those skills that are being given. And I believe that if the banks really go around, roll back a little bit and look at the individuals that are funded under the credit guarantee scheme, and I believe it's a perfect time to do an assessment. How many of them actually own assets? Yeah. How many of them actually use the money to buy company equipment, long-term investments, long-term assets? And if they are going back again after loans into having more liable assets or short-term assets that really do not produce revenue after a long time, we have not fulfilled the mandate strongly. And I believe in such a way, after credit guarantee, the bank should look at asset guarantee mechanisms. And I believe the government can also come strongly in that. Guarantee in a way that these individuals can be given funded with houses, because then the risk also becomes less.
So you're just not getting a guarantee, obviously, to get the credit to do whatever you have to do, but we are focusing that on streamlining and saying, look, if it's assets, then we provide some level of guarantee or security.
Definitely, because the bank deals with the individuals, and they know that they are capable of owning assets, owning long-term, equipment. However, the trust element should not be based on how the government assists them. It should also be a relationship that is extended between the private sector and these individuals. And I believe that would be very strong, because the aspect of, and I believe this was also raised once, that we need affordable housing in Namibia. And the synergy between government and the commercial banks should be strongly mandated to see how much the government can come forth and meet these individuals who are in the business segment halfway and say, we are willing to take up business individuals, recognize businesses, identify them, and see how we can avail land to them. Thank you.
I just want to, of course, in terms of the time, quite much of it has been taken also by the House as well. Just want to get some concluding remarks from your side. We know, of course, the tax amnesty has also been expanded. That should, of course, be a good news, particularly for those that owe penalties. Come forth, let NAMRA also update the status and their records as well, which, of course, improves their efficiency and revenue collection for government. Just having that also in note, your final comments for the conversation.
I was wondering when we get to that.
Yeah.
So, so I think I can say I know of a large taxpayer base who is grateful today, and that spans across individuals to the corporate entities as well, having this 2-year extension period. So I think the onus is on both NAMRA to make sure that data integrity can now be enhanced, but also for taxpayers coming to the party to make sure that the house is in order, having this additional 2 years available.
Just concluding remarks from your end, just particularly taking into the developments around the tax amnesty.
Just advocating from a very right-wing perspective, that we have seen how beneficial it was for the repo rates to be dropped. Obviously, there's a reflection in the first fiscal collection, and I would like to urge the monetary policy, when they sit in November, that they should consider this as one of their key interventions, that it can actually assist and help the economy, not just the economy, but also disposable income and the taxpayers as well, and also for employment creation. Thank you.
You see, that's one of the problematic things when you interview an economist. So now you're opening up new avenues and we're ending. Now to ask on that nesca between the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. But thank you very much once again for making time out to join us.
Thank you.
There we have it, always a productive conversation. That's Rodney Hwai, who's an economic researcher, and Mrs. Chantal Hasselman, senior country partner from PwC, joining us. Just analyze the mid budget review, of course, a midterm budget review by the Minister of Finance. It's been quite an interesting week since Monday. It had to be adjourned on 2 occasions, but like they say, third time is a charm, and we finally had that announcement. Some good and the bad coming out from there as well. We know the allocations that have been made towards drought, very, very important relief, about 700 million being provided there. Also, another big win for many segments of society that are taxpayers is that tax amnesty that has been extended for a very, very good period to, of course, enhance collection by NAMRA as well. So on that note, my name is Ricardo Magoseb. Just one reminder, once again, in the words of the Speaker of Parliament today, as the members of Parliament, of course, break for the break, he reminded us once again that this is a country that's built on the rule of law, peace and stability is our responsibility to maintain as they go out during this campaign period before the elections. On that note, have yourself a good one. From us here at the courtyard in Parliament, it's bye-bye.